You spent 5 years in prison for failing to pay child support for the defendant, Ms. Sears' son, and it was never proven that you are his biological father.
Number 10. Manser versus Sayre. Mr. Manser has brought Miss Sayre here to court today to prove his innocence and vindicate himself of being wrongfully accused of being the father of Miss Sayre's now teenage son Dylan, and consequently spend 5 years in prison for failing to pay child support to Dylan.
I don't care what your version was. I was far from a one-night stand.
Living across the street from each other?
Far from a one-night stand.
My wife's going to be upset because I live across the street from somebody I'm not dating them.
Oh, if I was your wife, I wouldn't trust you for nothing.
I don't think after...
The case is in full swing now, and Bill Manser narrates the intimacy, or rather the lack of intimacy, between him and Elizabeth Sayre. Elizabeth Sayre does not appreciate being described as a one-night stand.
All of this that has transpired, it really matters whether it was a one-night stand or a two-day trip.
My biggest concern.
The point is you all had a sexual relationship at some point, so there is a possibility that he's the father of your son Dylan.
Judge Lauren, however, is not interested in what kind of sexual relationship was in existence between the two parties. She just cares that there was a sexual relationship at some point that would increase or decrease the chances of Bill Manser being the father.
As I go through this evidence, I do see that for alleged father, it's entirely blank. Social security number.
That's right.
There is no address.
She forgot to put that part in there.
There is no information about you. It's all blank.
The case is getting spiced up now as Bill starts to question the whole evidence that got him imprisoned in the first place.
Obviously, your contention that you didn't show up, you weren't there for this particular test is true.
Right.
Because there's no evidence that you were there on that
exactly
day.
Right.
We've established that. What I do believe that's missing in all of this evidence is I don't see any information relating to the collection of the sample.
On closer inspection, there are very fishy circumstances as to how the DNA evidence was obtained. It's truly evolving into something out of a movie.
Your father treat Dylan well?
Yes. I've been withdrawn, I've been distant, but that's because of the doubt that I've had, you know?
You didn't even...
Now, Dylan, I want to know about your relationship with your father.
I feel I don't know him that well.
We don't know each other.
It's almost sad to see that Bill had to be distant from Dylan because of the doubt that he had about his paternity.
Mr. Manser, you are not
oh, God.
his father.
Oh, man.
The verdict is here, and now is when the case really turns on its head. It is announced by Judge Lauren, and it turns out Bill was right. This gives him mixed feelings, having suffered what he had suffered as it concerns to the paternity of Dylan.
Do you want to find out who your father is?
Of course.
Miss Sears, do you know?
Yes, ma'am.
You know who his father is?
Yes, I talk to him still.
To pour salt on the injury of Bill Manser's injury, Elizabeth Sears reveals that she knows the real father. This means that she lied, fabricated evidence to support the lie, and had Bill tossed in jail. That's one truly devious woman.
You say that you believe in your heart after 3 decades of questions and doubts that you know the identity of your biological father. You claim your mother, Mrs. Bailey, has misled you, abandoned you.
Maxina feels lied to and abandoned by her mom, which has brought her to the courtroom of Judge Lauren. On the other hand, Maxina's mom feels like her daughter believes only in conspiracies as far as this paternity goes.
And my mom had introduced me to a gentleman, and I just did not feel in my heart that he was my father. Mark Bomar, my mother met years ago, right around the time of my conception.
So, Ms. Franzoni, specifically, why are you convinced this man is your father?
We have a lot of similar characteristics. Even when I tell him things about my life and things that I've had happen in my life, I just feel we have so much in common.
Maxina started to judge Lauren that she was feeling a lack of connection to the man she was told is her dad. She feels a stronger connection to the ex-bounty hunter, Mark Balmer.
I had her, and you need to stay in your lane.
She needs to.
That's
she
my
wants to
child.
know who her father is.
Well, okay,
That's just the
but
point.
you still need to stay in your place.
They did a DNA.
So I've been
But she
her mother
has.
to the past.
And both of you
Ever
guys.
since
Rose,
you
can you go stand in between them?
You ain't never been a mother. You should have went and had a
That's
baby.
right.
Tell
Listen
that
to the judge.
lady.
Listen to the judge.
Even though the paternity is in doubt, one thing that is for sure is that Maxine is caught in a beef between her mother and her godmother. Judge Lauren has come in between and break up the fight between the two older women, while simultaneously letting them know that this paternity case is not about them.
But by the same token, when she called me up to tell me about it, I said, well, let's forget about all of that. Just tell me what the situation is.
Okay.
And she said, well, this young lady wants to know if you're her father, and it's a possibility that you could be.
The supposed father of Maxina believes there might be a possibility that Maxina is his daughter on account of how intimate he was with his mother, though he does not remember enough to come to a logical conclusion about whether he is the father or not.
Mr. Bomar, you are not her father. I'm sorry to you both.
The results are read out, and it turns out that Mr. Bomber is not the father. Mr. Bomber and Maxina are visibly torn about this, on account of the relationship they had already built. Mr. Bomber is resolute that Maxina is still like a daughter to him regardless of the results.
Shambles, because you've been stuck paying support for a child you know is not yours.
Yes, Your Honor.
And you claim previous courts have denied your request for DNA testing because you allegedly signed an acknowledgement of paternity.
Yes, Your Honor.
Number 8. Harper Sr. versus Harper and Harper Jr. Mr. Harper has requested a paternity test to prove that he has wrongly been paying for a child that is not his, and he simply can't go on like that. Mrs. Harper veered her son Harper Jr. into thinking Mr. Harper is simply a bad father, and would like the test to expose him for the bad father he is.
You spent 21 days in jail because of failure to pay support, or you gotten behind?
Yes, I had gotten behind in my child support. Told me that I was behind in child support. At that time, I didn't even know I was supposed to be paying child support.
He just told a story because when they sent me a letter, they told me he was $25,000 behind.
Mr. Harper describes the hardship he has gone through because he was considered the father, but from Mrs. Harper's reaction, you can tell that she thinks Mr. Harper deserves all that he got.
About 7 to 11. Since 2005, out of 10 years, I've only seen him 3 years.
I hadn't seen him in so many years because she wouldn't allow me to. They moved out of town.
I used to try to talk to him every day. I used to call my sister every day or every other day trying to get in touch with him.
Harper Jr. is asked to testify on the relationship with his father, and there is not much to describe because it does not seem like Mr. Harper has bothered to make many sacrifices to see Harper Jr.
It has been determined by this court, Mr. Harper Sr., you are his father.
The verdict is given, and the consensus is that Mr. Harper can be a better father to the child he has neglected for so long.
You claim Mr. Figures disappeared 20 years ago, and now you want to prove that he is definitely your son, Daniil's biological father.
Number 7. Jackson and Jackson versus Figures. Lucretia Jackson and her son are here to prove the former lady's man, Mr. Figures, is the father of her son. Mr. Figures claims he is definitely not the dad. Mr. Figures says that she was actively seeing another person while they were intimate, which is why he doubts that he is the father in this particular case. Lucretia's son accuses Mr. Figures of not being a man and stepping up to his fatherly duties, as you could tell he feels strongly about it. Mr. Figures, in his defense, says you should hate the game, not the player. Mr. Figures ends up not being the father, and he does not even react much, almost like he was not surprised at the outcome.
It has been determined by this court, Mr. Figures, you are not the father.
But he understands how it feels to be without a dad, and sends his best wishes to Daniel Jackson on his search for his real father. As it turns out, it's luck that he won't need it, because his mother knows exactly who the dad is, and the answer shocks everyone, especially Judge Lauren.
Father of the defendant's son, Travaris, but know who is.
Yes, Your
You
Honor.
claim she deceived you into believing you were the father to collect child support, and as a result of your inability to pay, your driver's license was suspended and your tax return was taken.
Yes, Your Honor.
Number 6. Robinson and Robinson versus Grant. Mr. Robinson and his wife brings a paternity action against Miss Grant, who claims that Mr. Robinson is the father of her now grown child. In addition to that, he would also be fighting for payment of all damages he has suffered. Miss Grant opens her case strong with evidence proving that Mr. Robinson signed the birth certificate and an affidavit acknowledging the paternity of Mr. Christian. The judge announces the results, and none of the parties involved is Christian's father.
It has been determined by this court, Mr. Eddie Ellis, you are not the father.
This means that Miss Grant will have to do some sober reflection to remember who the dad is.
Take you for a ride by claiming this baby is yours.
Yes, Your Honor.
Additionally, you say when today's DNA results prove you are not the father, you are seeking $1,500 for housing and child care expenses.
Yes, Your Honor.
Number 5. Jones versus Milan. In this case, Mr. Jones and his mother brought the mother of 3-month-old Quinnell Jr. to the paternity court to determine that he bears no paternity to the child in question, and even charges for child-raising expenses and tend.
Pregnant. Even though she said it could be yours or it could be my ex's, did you step up?
Yes, ma'am.
You did?
Yes, ma'am. I wanted to make sure. I wanted to make sure if it's a possibility of being my child, I want to be there. I don't want to miss nothing. I want to be able to go back and tell.
By all indications, Mr. Jones has been involved in the child's life, despite not knowing whether the child is his.
It has been determined by this court. Mr. Jones, you are not the father.
The news hits Mr. Jones hard, and you can tell the poor man loves that child like it's his flesh and blood. Mr. Jones and his mother withdraw their money claim to support the kids. Stand up, people.
You say in the heat of the moment they inadvertently revealed that it was possible your dad, Mr. Jacobs, is not your biological father.
Number 4. Racer and Hunt versus Jacobs. Precious Racer and her brother, Hector Hunt, are in paternity court after a heated argument between their supposed father, and their mother revealed that their paternity may have been a lie all this time.
So, Ms. Hammonds, you're admitting that in the heat of the argument, you said this statement. You made this statement to Mr. Jacobs that you're not their father anyway.
Yes, ma'am.
But it was just in the heat of the moment, you said.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hammond said some things he wishes he could take back, but that ship has sailed.
Of Razor, Hunt versus Jacobs, Hammonds, as it pertains to 26-year-old Precious Razor, Mr. Farmer.
Yes.
Are not.
Yes!
Her
oh my God! Oh! Oh my God! Oh.
Precious almost faints from the relief that Tommy Farmer is not the father, but that does not last long because the father figure she has known all her life was also not the father.
Razor, Mr. Jacobs, you
are the father.
Are not. Her father.
The news is pretty deep, and Hector silently walks out of the court with much apparent turmoil on his young face. Precious cannot get over how scandalous the whole affair is.
Men and women.
Yes, Sean.
You state you have every reason to doubt that you are 1-year-old Keegan's biological father because of Mrs. Green's sexual track record.
Yes, Sean.
Now, you've petitioned the court for a paternity test.
Yes, ma'am.
Number 3. Green versus Green. Mr. Green brought his wife to paternity court because he believes that she has been promiscuous. Whitney Green claims her husband is just as bad.
This time, when this child was conceived, you were only sleeping with your husband.
Yes, ma'am, and I don't know what women have to do with anything because none of them definitely got me pregnant, so that don't even have nothing to do with what's going on, really. But
no, it don't, but I'm going to explain
Mr. Green, you say there are rumors you heard that she was with other people.
Yes, there's rumors that I heard she was with other people. Yeah, this is all around the same time, yes. This is all around the same time. We was partying, having a good time.
Together.
Or whatever, together. Yeah, we was partying, having a good time together. But at the end of the day, I was about you.
Judge Lauren concludes that there is not much of a marriage between the couple, with the way of Mr. and Mrs. Green changing sexual partners like clothes.
You know what I'm saying? Like, she brought
well, she's not going to get pregnant by a woman. I hate to break that to you, so we need to understand what men have you heard?
No, I'm going to get back to the female part, if I can elaborate.
No, you're going to get back to the part I need to understand because a female cannot impregnate anybody, and this is paternity court, so we need somebody to be a father.
Though now it sounds like Mr. Green's only evidence to support his claims are rumors and the fact that his wife slept with a couple of women. While it's all interesting, it has nothing to do with the paternity court.
Mrs. Green, what do you know?
I mean, once he told me that she was pregnant, I'm like, yo, listen. I'm like, you know what? Before I can even finish saying Whitney, he like, who? I'm like, wait, he like, who? I'm like, wait, he like, no. I'm like, oh.
And that reaction means turned up. I'm getting it.
Mr. Green's witness gave the most colorful and turnt testimony you will ever hear in a paternity court. He even managed to do it respectively. Mr. Green turns out to be the father in this interesting paternity case, though Judge Lauren still feels compelled to caution both adult parties to remember that regardless of how their relationship goes, they should do better as parents.
That the day before your son's tragic death, he told you what you have always believed. He was not the biological father of the defendant's 3-year-old daughter, Alexis, and 16-month-old son, Nicholas.
Number 2. Gates versus Rembold. The mother of the late Mr. Gates claims that Angela Rembold is lying about her late son being the father of Angela's infant daughter and son. This case seems like a mix-up in the dying declaration of Mr. Gates. I think he was trying to prank them one last time before he died.
Well, this is basically an inconclusive result. So as a result, we did some additional testing. We then compared Alexis and Nicholas to see whether they were full or half siblings. And the results of that siblingship test showed with a 99.99995% likelihood that Alexis and Nicholas do indeed share the same biological father.
The test results come in, and both parties are pleased to hear that both kids belong to the late Mr. Gates. Both women seem to bury the proverbial hatchet.
That after years of lies from your mother and uncertainty about who your father is, you believe you finally found him. You intend to prove that today. Is that
Number 1. Lindsay versus Dannenbrink. Lindsay brings a paternity action against Mr. Dannenbrink. She claims her paternity link to Mr. Dannenbrink is common knowledge in her town, and now she wants it officially proclaimed by the paternity court.
When I was about 16 years old, an ex of Mr. Dannenbrink's came to my house and accused me of being the child that they had had together. And when I had asked my mother about that, she told me no, that it wasn't true.
Lindsay's proof is that Mr. Dannenbrink's ex came to her when she was 16 and accused her of being the child of Mr. Dannenbrink, though the mom denied such allegations.
Mr. Dannenbrink, you are not her father.
It doesn't matter. I consider her my daughter.
Mr. Dannenbrink is not Lindsay's father. She takes the news as well as anyone who wanted some paternal closure.